Hello and welcome. We are at the Women Deliver 2016 conference in Copenhagen to explore the solutions to some of the most pressing challenges faced by girls and women across the world. I'm Ridi Tlabi. In the studio, I have with me Mabel van Oranje, who founded the organization Girls, Not Brides, which is a global partnership to end child marriage. A pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
How prevalent, how widespread is child marriage?
Well, the problem of child marriage is actually enormous. We're talking about 15 million girls getting married every year before the age of 18. So that means every 2 seconds, somewhere in the world, a girl under the age of 18 is getting married. And this is happening across countries, across continents, across religions, and across cultures. So it's a truly global problem. Now, you could say, ooh, that's terrible. It's an enormous human rights abuse. And that's what indeed it is, but it's much more. Because what we see is, imagine, you're a 13-year-old girl, and then your parents come and say you're going to get married tomorrow to a man who's probably much older than you are, and it often means that you're pulled out of school. So your chances of ever earning a decent living for the rest of your life are pretty much gone. And then you go off and live with that man, and basically your main value becomes your fertility. So what we see is that these girls often get babies at an early age, and they get a lot of them. And it's of course no surprise that the maternal mortality problems of these girls are really high, because these children are still children when they have to give birth. So this is not only a huge human rights abuse, but it's also a real impediment to eradicating poverty.
It has impact on education, on health, and so on. But I want to know, how high up the agenda is this issue for global leaders? And I ask this because recently the African Union dealt with it, but beyond just talking, are world leaders waking up and doing something?
Well, I think it's fair to say that until a few years ago, this problem was not really getting the attention that it deserves. In a way, these 15 million girls were invisible. Now, luckily, that's starting to change. And thanks also to the hard work of all these civil society organizations that are members of Girls Not Brides. And so what we see is now in the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the global agenda for eradicating poverty in the coming 15 years, ending child marriage is one of the targets. And we also have now resolutions at the United Nations. Like you said, the African Union has developed a plan. But what is most important, all this global awareness that now exists is starting to trickle down there where the real difference has to be made. So we see, first of all, African countries to start to develop national strategies. We see good progress, for example, in Mozambique. We see good progress in Ghana, in Zambia. And hopefully that will lead to more progress all over the continent. And the other thing we see is that we see much more activity on the grassroots level. Because if you want to change a social norm like ending child marriage, you really need to make the difference there where it happens. So you need to have change in the lives of the girls, in the lives of their families and of their communities. And that needs to be done not by outsiders, but by people who really understand what happens in the community.
That's so important, precisely because when we talk about child marriage, it's both a personal and a political issue. And the fact that the girls are being married off with the consent or participation of their parents and the community, I imagine that would make the outside world reluctant to step in, reluctant to usurp the authority of the parents. But it is important that that happens.
Absolutely. Look, I think that every parent anywhere in the world wants the best for their daughters. Unfortunately, there are a lot of circumstances where parents think that marrying their daughters off at a very young age is actually in their best interest. And that can be driven by tradition. People do it because it has been done generation after another. It can be done because of security, fear for the sexuality, the prudence of the girl. It can be done because there are no alternatives, there's no schooling. So there's a whole host of reasons, poverty, that drives this. But what we know is that if you enter into a dialogue in a respectful way with the parents and with others who have a power over the girl, it can be traditional leaders, it can be local religious leaders, with the teachers. And when you help them understand that keeping the girl in school and out of marriage is not only good for the girl, but it's actually good for the community. Because a girl who stays in school and out of marriage will have a much bigger earning power. And we all know that girls and women who earn money put most of that money back into their families. So actually not only then the families win, but even the country wins.
Absolutely. I love the emphasis on the economic power on education, because marrying a child off can take care of the immediate needs of food for today and tomorrow, because the man pays the family, but education is something that cannot be taken away from the girl. Tell me about the strategy that you are developing with Girls Not Brides. And I know that your targets are 2017, 2020. It's still a work in progress, but what would it entail?
So what we would like to see is much more action on a national level in those countries where child marriage is highly prevalent. National strategies, not just by the Ministry of Gender, but national strategies where all relevant sectors work together. So the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Health, but also we know that government on their own can't do this. So we need them then to work together with civil society, with religious leaders, with the media, of course. And so what we would hope is that in the countries where child marriage is happening, that we see these strategies being developed, but that needs to then be complemented by making sure that girls are aware of their agency, because many girls don't know that they have rights. So we need an empowerment programs for girls. We need to do sensitization of parents and their communities, helping them understand why it's better that their girls don't marry at a young age. And then we need, of course, services. Because if we keep a girl out of marriage, we need to have alternatives. We need to have schooling, but also we need to make sure that there is sexual education and that they don't end up being pregnant outside marriage.
You're doing amazing work empowering girls, and the future is brighter with an empowered generation of girls. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and I'm convinced that if we all work together at all levels, because we can all make a difference, that then we can make sure that all over Africa and everywhere in the world, girls can be girls and not brides.
Mabel van Oranje, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here at the Women Deliver Conference. You can tweet your comments and your questions about this and our other shows using the hashtag WDLive. And of course, our Twitter handle is @WomenDeliver. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.